Sarah Bennett stepped off the train in Montana Territory expecting a wedding and a fresh start. Instead, she found a funeral, a grief-stricken rancher who wanted nothing to do with her, and a 3-year-old girl who needed a mother. Cole Harrison had buried his heart with his wife and his brother. He had no room for a stranger, especially one carrying secrets that could destroy them all. But on a frontier where survival demands trust and winter shows no mercy, two broken souls discovered that healing doesn't ask permission. As Sarah became the mother Emma desperately needed, and the partner Cole had forgotten he wanted the past she'd fled came hunting. Now, the widowed rancher, who swore never to love again, must decide send her away to safety or risk everything to keep her. In the unforgiving beauty of 1878 Montana, where a woman's lullaby could melt a hardened heart, and a man's protection could mean salvation. Sometimes the family you choose is worth fighting for even when danger rides in with the snow. If you love stories of second chances, slow burn romance, and the healing power of family, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens when two people who've lost everything find each other. Now let's begin. You're not Thomas. Broken bride arrives to funeral, and wedding rancher refuses to love. The train's whistle cut through the Montana Territory afternoon like a promise being kept. Sarah Bennett pressed her gloved hand against the cold window, watching the vast emptiness give way to the scattered buildings of Cedar Ridge. 6 weeks of traveling had led to this moment. 6 weeks of rehearsing what she'd say when she finally met Thomas Harrison, the man whose letters had offered her salvation when she'd had nowhere else to turn. The letters sat in her carpet bag tied with a blue ribbon. 23 of them, each one painting a picture of a life she desperately wanted to believe in. A ranch in Montana, wide open spaces where a person could breathe. A kind man who wanted a partner, not a possession. A fresh start where the ghosts of San Francisco couldn't follow. Sarah closed her eyes and steadied her breathing. The fear that had been her constant companion since that night 3 months ago, the night she'd witnessed Marcus Delacroix put a bullet through his business rival's skull, would end here. In Montana, she would become someone new. Mrs. Thomas Harrison, a rancher's wife, safe. The train lurched to a stop. Sarah gathered her belongings, one carpet bag, one trunk, and a heart full of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. The platform was nearly empty. A few weathered ranchers loaded supplies onto wagons. An elderly couple embraced a young woman who must have been their daughter. But no one approached Sarah as she stepped down her traveling dress, already dusty from the journey. She scanned the faces, looking for the man Thomas had described in his letters. Tall, he'd written. Sandy hair, an easy smile. But minutes passed and no one came forward. "Ma'am," a boy of perhaps 14 approached, his hat clutched in his hands. "You, Mrs. Bennett, the mail-order bride?" Sarah's stomach tightened at the public announcement of her purpose, but she nodded. "I am. Is Mr. Harrison, is Thomas unable to come?" The boy's face went pale. He looked over his shoulder, and Sarah followed his gaze to where a man stood beside a wagon, his back to them. Even from a distance, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders as the way he held himself apart from the bustling platform. "Ma'am, I think you better come with me." The walk across the platform felt endless. The man by the wagon didn't turn, not even as their footsteps approached. He was taller than Thomas had described himself, broader through the shoulders. His coat was black, and when he finally turned to face her, Sarah's breath caught. This wasn't the easy smile Thomas had promised. This was a face carved from stone, all hard angles and darker shadows. His eyes were gray like winter clouds, and they looked at her with something that made her want to step backward. Not cruelty, worse, indifference. "Mr. Harrison." Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Cole Harrison." His voice was low, rough. "Thomas's brother." The past tense registered slowly like a wound that took a moment to start bleeding. "Where is Thomas?" Cole Harrison's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the mountains in the distance. "There was an accident 2 weeks ago. Cattle stampede. Thomas was trying to turn the herd when his horse went down." He paused, and Sarah watched his throat work. He didn't suffer. The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Sarah reached out, found the edge of the wagon, held on. 2 weeks ago, Thomas had been dead for 2 weeks, and she'd been on a train traveling toward a future that no longer existed. "I see." The words felt absurd even as she spoke them. She didn't see anything. The carefully constructed hope she'd built over the past months was crumbling, and beneath it was the cold reality of her situation. She had $17 to her name, no family, and people in San Francisco who would kill her if they found her. "I'm sorry you made the journey for nothing." Cole's voice was still flat, empty of emotion. "I can arrange passage back to, where did you come from?" "San Francisco." The word tasted like ash. "But I can't." She stopped herself. She couldn't tell this stranger that she couldn't go back, that returning to California meant a bullet in an alley or a knife in the dark. "I don't have the funds for a return ticket." Something flickered in Cole Harrison's eyes. Not sympathy exactly, recognition perhaps of a trapped animal. He was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah found herself studying him against her will. He was handsome in a harsh way, like the landscape itself. Dark hair longer than was fashionable curling slightly at his collar. A scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Hands that looked like they knew hard work and harder winters. "The ranch needs help," he said finally. "I can't pay much, but there's a room in the house, meals. If you're willing to work as a housekeeper until you save enough for wherever you're going next." Pride warred with desperation, and desperation won. Sarah nodded. "I'm willing. Get in the wagon." The boy loaded her trunk while Sarah climbed up. Cole Harrison took the reins without looking at her, and they left Cedar Ridge behind in silence. The ranch was an hour's ride through country, so beautiful it hurt to look at. Mountains rose in the distance like cathedral walls. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, so blue it seemed impossible. But Sarah couldn't appreciate any of it. She sat beside a man who clearly wished she were anywhere else, heading toward a life she hadn't chosen, running from a death she couldn't escape. "There are rules," Cole said, breaking the silence so abruptly Sarah startled. "You keep to your room and the kitchen. You don't go into my room or my daughter's room without permission. You don't ask questions about my family. You work hard, and when you've saved enough to leave, you leave." Understood. His daughter. Thomas had never mentioned that Cole had a child. Understood. And one more thing. This time he did look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Thomas made you promises I didn't authorize and can't keep. Whatever you expected from this arrangement, forget it. You're here to work. Nothing more." The words should have stung, but Sarah felt only relief. She didn't want complications. She didn't want anyone looking too closely at her past or asking too many questions about her future. A business arrangement suited her perfectly. Nothing more, she agreed. They didn't speak again until the ranch came into view. The house was larger than Sarah had expected, a two-story structure with a wide porch and windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a stable, what looked like a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and the whole scene had an air of prosperity that surprised her. Cole brought the wagon to a stop and jumped down without offering to help her. Sarah climbed down on her own, her legs stiff from the journey. The front door opened, and an elderly woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was kind, lined with years and worry, and when she saw Sarah, something like relief crossed her features. "Mary," Cole said by way of introduction, "this is Sarah Bennett. She'll be staying on as housekeeper." "Sarah Mary Thornton. She's been helping out since—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "She's been helping out." Mary came forward and took both of Sarah's hands in hers. "Welcome, dear. I'm sure you're exhausted. Come inside and I'll show you your room." "Where's Emma?" Cole asked. "Napping finally. Poor lamb's been fussy all day." Mary gave Cole a meaningful look. She misses her uncle. Cole's face might have been carved from granite. "I'll see to the horses." He walked away without another word, and Sarah watched him go. There was something almost violent in the rigidity of his posture, as if he were holding himself together through sheer force of will. "Don't mind him," Mary said softly. "He's grieving." Thomas was more than a brother to him. They were partners in everything. And with Rebecca Gale, she shook her head. "Come along, let's get you settled." The inside of the house was as well maintained as the outside. The furniture was simple but quality. The floors polished, everything neat and ordered. Mary led Sarah upstairs to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. "It's not much, but it's clean and the bed's comfortable. There's water in the pitcher and I'll bring up fresh towels. Supper's at 6. Cole usually eats in silence, so don't be offended." Mary hesitated at the door. I should tell you Emma's only 3. She lost her mama when she was born, and now her Uncle Thomas is gone too. She's, she needs patience. I understand, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure she did. She'd never been around children much. In San Francisco, she'd worked as a secretary in Marcus Delacroix's import business until the night she'd stayed late and seen what he really imported. After Mary left, Sarah sat on the bed and let herself feel the weight of the day. Thomas was dead. She was stranded in Montana territory with a man who clearly resented her presence. She had no money, no prospects, and nowhere to run if Delacroix's men ever tracked her here. She should have felt despair. Instead, she felt a strange, fragile sense of relief. Here in this remote corner of the world, maybe she could finally breathe. A cry shattered the quiet, a child's cry, high and frightened. Sarah stood without thinking and opened her door. The crying was coming from a room down the hall. She hesitated. Cole had said to stay out of his daughter's room, but the crying grew more desperate. She knocked softly. "Hello." The crying stopped for a moment, then resumed with renewed vigor. Sarah opened the door. The room was painted a soft yellow with wildflowers in a vase by the window. A small bed sat against one wall, and in it a little girl with dark curls and tear-stained cheeks was sitting up, her arms outstretched. "Mama," she sobbed. "Want Mama." Sarah's heart cracked. She crossed to the bed and sat on the edge. "I'm not your mama, sweetheart. I'm Sarah." Emma looked at her with gray eyes, so like her father's it was startling. "Where's Uncle Thomas?" "I don't know, little one." The lie caught in her throat. "But how did you tell a 3-year-old about death?" "Are you thirsty? Would you like some water?" Emma nodded, her thumb finding its way to her mouth. Sarah found a cup by the bedside and helped Emma drink. The little girl's tears slowed, and she studied Sarah with cautious interest. "Pretty," Emma said, reaching out to touch Sarah's hair. "Thank you." Sarah smoothed the dark curls back from Emma's forehead. "You're very pretty, too." "Papa's sad." The simple statement carried the weight of a truth Sarah suspected Emma didn't fully understand. "Yes, he is." "Are you Shesabayam?" Sarah thought about Thomas, who she'd never met, about the life she'd lost in San Francisco, about the fear that still woke her in the night. "Yes," she said. "I'm sad, too." Emma seemed to consider this. Then she scooted over in the bed and patted the space beside her. "You can stay." It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had said to Sarah in months. She lay down beside the little girl, and Emma curled against her side, her small body warm and trusting. "Tell me a story," Emma murmured. Sarah searched her memory for something appropriate, something that wouldn't frighten a child who'd already lost so much. She settled on a tale about a brave rabbit who made friends with a wolf, and before she'd finished, Emma's breathing had evened into sleep. Sarah stayed where she was, afraid to move and wake the child. The light outside shifted from gold to amber, and she must have dozed because the next thing she knew, someone was standing in the doorway. Cole Harrison. His face was unreadable in the fading light, but Sarah could feel the intensity of his gaze. She carefully extracted herself from Emma's embrace and rose from the bed, smoothing her dress. "I heard her crying," Sarah whispered as she approached the door. "I'm sorry. I know you said not to come in here without permission, but she hasn't slept through the night since Thomas died." Cole's voice was so low she almost didn't hear him. He looked past her to where Emma slept peacefully. One small hand curled under her cheek. "Mary's been here every day, and Emma won't settle for her." They stood in the doorway close enough that Sarah could smell leather and pine and something uniquely him. Close enough to see the exhaustion etched into his face, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and grief held too tightly. "You should go," he said, but the edge had left his voice. "Supper's ready." Sarah followed him downstairs, acutely aware of his presence just ahead of her. In the kitchen, Mary had laid out a simple meal, venison stew, fresh bread, coffee. The 3 of them ate in the silence Mary had warned her about, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of people too tired for words. After Mary left, Sarah cleared the dishes while Cole stood by the window, looking out at the darkening ranch. She washed and dried, finding a rhythm in the simple work, and tried not to think about how temporary this all was. "My wife loved this view." Sarah's hands stilled in the water. Cole hadn't moved, hadn't turned to face her, but his voice carried across the kitchen like a confession. "She'd stand here every evening and watch the sun go down. Said it was different at every night." He paused. "She died 3 years ago. complications from childbirth. Sarah didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She dried the last plate and set it carefully on the shelf. Thomas stepped up after that. Help me run the ranch, help me raise Emma. He was supposed to. Cole's voice roughened and he stopped. When he spoke again, the emotion was locked away. You'll find everything you need in the pantry. Mary's been cooking, but she has her own family to tend to. Starting tomorrow, meals are your responsibility. I understand. Breakfast at 5. I'll be in the fields most days. Mr. Harrison. Cole. He turned finally, and in the lamplight his face looked carved from shadows. If you're going to be living in this house, you might as well call me Cole. Cole, she repeated, and something in the way his name sounded on her lips made his eyes darken. Thank you for letting me stay. He gave a short nod and walked out, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Sarah finished in the kitchen and made her way upstairs. As she passed Emma's room, she heard the little girl whimper in her sleep. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, but the whimper faded into silence. In her own room, Sarah unpacked her few belongings and prepared for bed. Through the wall, she could hear Cole moving in the adjacent room, his room, she realized. The sound of boots being removed, the creak of bed ropes, then silence. She lay into the darkness and listened to the night sounds of Montana wind in the eaves, cattle lowing in the distance, the settling of an old house. It was so different from San Francisco, where the city never truly slept, and danger lurked in gaslight shadows. Here maybe she could finally rest. She fell asleep thinking of a little girl's gray eyes and the way Cole Harrison's voice had softened when he spoke of his wife. The days developed a rhythm. Sarah woke before dawn and started the stove. Coffee first strong and black the way Cole drank it. Then breakfast eggs, bacon biscuits. He ate in silence, nodded his thanks, and disappeared into the work of the ranch before the sun had fully risen. Emma woke next, and Sarah discovered a surprising tenderness in herself as she dressed. The little girl brushed her dark curls, coaxed her to eat. Emma was shy at first, watching Sarah with those cautious gray eyes, but gradually she warmed. By the third day, she was chattering freely, telling Sarah about the chickens and the horses and her doll named Molly. Mary came less often now, and Sarah was grateful. The older woman was kind, but her presence reminded Sarah that she was temporary help, a placeholder until Cole could find someone more permanent. The work was harder than anything Sarah had done in San Francisco, but she found she didn't mind. There was satisfaction in scrubbing floors until they gleamed in kneading bread dough and beating rugs on the porch while Emma played nearby. Her hands grew rough and her back ached by evening, but her mind was finally quiet. At night, she lay in her room and listened to Cole move through the house, his steady footsteps checking the doors, banking the fire, climbing the stairs. Sometimes she heard him pause outside Emma's room, and she imagined him standing there watching his daughter sleep. She tried not to think about him, but it was impossible when they shared a house. She noticed things despite herself, the way his hair curled at his collar when he came in from the rain, the rare half-smile that crossed his face when Emma said something that amused him, the careful way he never touched Sarah, always keeping a deliberate distance between them as if contact might burn. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Sarah began to recognize the rhythm of the ranch when the hands came in for their noon meal, when Cole rode out to check the herds when Emma napped. She learned which hens laid the best eggs and how to coax the temperamental stove when it wouldn't draw properly. She also learned to read Cole's silences, the tight set of his jaw when he was angry about something, the way his shoulders dropped when he was bone-tired, the distance in his eyes when grief-stricken caught him unawares. They spoke little, a few words at meals, instructions about Emma or in the household, nothing personal. But Sarah felt the weight of everything unsaid between them, the acknowledgement that she was supposed to be Thomas's bride, that she was living in a dead woman's house, that neither of them had chosen this arrangement. It was a Saturday when everything changed. Sarah was in the kitchen, flour dusting her apron as she rolled out pie crust. Emma sat at the table, carefully cutting shapes from dough scraps with a tin cup. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, and for a moment Sarah let herself pretend this was her life, this kitchen, this child, this peace. The door opened, and Cole came in, stopping short when he saw them. "We're making pie," Emma announced. "Apple pie. I can see that." Cole's eyes moved from his daughter to Sarah, lingering on the streak of flour across her cheek. Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to see. There'll be enough for supper, Sarah said, suddenly self-conscious. If you'd like some. I'd like some, Papa. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. The corner of Cole's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Then I'd like some too. He moved past them to the wash basin, and Sarah was acutely aware of how small the kitchen suddenly seemed. He was so close she could have reached out and touched him. Close enough to see the dark stubble on his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders beneath his work shirt, the way his hands moved as he rolled up his sleeves. She turned back to her pie, but her hands weren't quite steady. Emma. Cole said, his voice gentle in a way Sarah had rarely heard. Why don't you go play with Molly for a bit? Let Sarah finish the pie. Emma considered this, then nodded and skipped out, her doll shapes forgotten. The silence stretched between them. Sarah focused on crimping the edge of the crust, trying to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster. She's happier, Cole said. Sarah looked up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Emma, he continued, she's been happier since you came. She sleeps through the night now. Eats better. She's laughing again. She's a lovely child. She is. He paused, and Sarah saw him wrestling with something. Thomas wrote to you about the ranch, about his life here. He didn't tell you about Em, did he? No. Cole's jaw tightened. He thought it might scare you off. A ready-made family. He was probably right. It wouldn't have, Sarah said softly. Scared me off, I mean. I came here for a fresh start. A child wouldn't have changed that. Why did you need a fresh start? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah's hands stilled on the pie crust. This was dangerous ground. Cole was watching her with those sharp gray eyes that seemed to see too much. San Francisco wasn't safe for me anymore, she said, choosing her words carefully. I needed to leave. Were you running from the law? No. That at least was true. I was running from people the law couldn't touch. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Thomas didn't know that when he proposed. No, I didn't tell him everything. Are you going to tell me? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, at the grief he carried like a weight on his shoulders, at the loneliness in his eyes that he tried to hide behind stone, at the way he held himself apart from everything, even his own daughter, as if closeness meant pain. Not today, she said finally. He nodded, accepting this. Fair enough. We all have our ghosts. He left the kitchen, and Sarah stood alone with her half-finished pie, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or the first step towards something that terrified her even more than Marcus Delacroix. Trust. The next morning, Emma woke with a fever. Sarah heard her crying at dawn and went to her room to find the little girl flushed and whimpering, her forehead hot to the touch. Fear lanced through her. She'd seen fever take strong men in San Francisco, watch them burn up from the inside until there was nothing left. Cole, she didn't realize she'd called his name until he was there filling the doorway in his nightshirt and hastily pulled on pants. What is it? She's burning up. He was beside the bed in 2 strides, his hand gentle on Emma's forehead. His face went tight. How long has she been like this? I just found her. Get cold water and rags. I'll hold her. Sarah ran downstairs, her hands shaking as she pumped water and grabbed clean cloths. When she returned, Cole had gathered Emma into his arms, murmuring soft words Sarah couldn't quite hear. For the next several hours, they worked together in silent cooperation. Sarah bathed Emma's face and arms with cool water while Cole held her. When Emma's fever spiked higher and she started to cry, Cole walked her around the room, rocking her against his chest. When she finally fell into a fitful sleep, they both sagged with relief. I'll watch her, Sarah said. You should get some rest. I'm not leaving her. Cole's voice was flat final. So they sat on opposite sides of Emma's bed as the sun climbed higher and the fever raged on. Sarah dampened cloths and changed them when they grew warm. Cole held his daughter's hand and didn't move except to shift his weight. By afternoon, Emma's fever broke. She opened her eyes clear and focused and whispered, thirsty. Cole helped her drink while Sarah nearly wept with relief. Emma fell back asleep, a real sleep this time, peaceful and healing, and Cole finally stood stretching muscles that had been locked in place for hours. Thank you, he said, and the words sounded rusty as if he weren't used to saying them. You don't have to thank me. Sarah stood, too suddenly aware that they were alone in Emma's room, the afternoon light soft around them. I care about her. I can see that. Cole's eyes were on her face, searching for something. You're good with her. Better than I am sometimes. That's not true. She adores you. She needs more than I can give her. She needs, he stopped, looked away. She needs what Rebecca would have given her. What Thomas might have given her if he'd married you. The admission seemed pulled from somewhere deep. Sarah saw the pain in his face, the weight of everything he thought he'd failed at. She needs her father, Sarah said gently. She already has that. Cole's throat worked. He looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully now, then back at Sarah. I can't be what everyone needs me to be. I tried after Rebecca died. I tried to be enough for Emma, enough to keep the ranch running, enough to... His voice cracked. I'm just tired, Sarah. I'm so damn tired. The confession hung between them like a wound laid bare. Sarah took a step closer, then another, until they were standing face to face in the soft afternoon light. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. You don't have to be enough for everyone, she said softly. You just have to be here. Cole's eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were darker, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen them. His gaze dropped to her mouth and Sarah's breath caught. For a moment, one fragile, dangerous moment, she thought he might kiss her. Then Emma stirred in her sleep and the spell broke. Cole stepped back, his face closing like a door, slamming shut. I should check the stock, he said, his voice rough. Can you... I'll stay with her. He nodded and left his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Sarah sank into the chair beside Emma's bed and pressed her hand to her racing heart. What had just happened? What had almost happened? She thought about the way Cole had looked at her, the raw need in his eyes, the way his body had swayed toward hers before he caught himself. And she thought about her own reaction, the heat that had flooded through her, the desire to close the distance between them, to offer comfort in the most intimate way possible. This was dangerous. She was supposed to be saving money to leave. She was supposed to be keeping her head down, staying invisible. Getting involved with Cole Harrison, letting herself care about him and Emma was the opposite of safe. But as Emma slept on and the afternoon light turned to amber, Sarah had to admit the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was already involved, already caring, and she had no idea how to stop. The days after Emma's fever became something different. Cole didn't retreat back into his shell of silence, not completely. He still disappeared into the work of the ranch, still kept a careful distance, but there were cracks in his armor now. He asked Sarah's opinion about things, small things at first, whether Emma needed a warmer coat for the coming winter, if the men's stew needed more salt. But gradually the questions became more substantial. Which cattle should he sell at market? Whether he should hire another hand for the winter months. Why are you asking me? Sarah said one evening as they washed dishes side by side, a routine that had developed organically born of efficiency and something neither of them wanted to name. Because you have a good head on your shoulders. Cole handed her a plate to dry. And because Thomas trusted you enough to ask you to marry him. That means something. Sarah's hand stilled on the plate. They'd never discussed Thomas directly, never acknowledged the strangeness of her position in this household. Did it bother you that he wrote to me without telling you? Cole was quiet for a long moment. No, Thomas was his own man. He had a right to look for a wife if he wanted. He paused. What bothered me was that he was moving on and I wasn't. The confession was so unexpected that Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. In the lamplight, with his sleeves rolled up and his guard down, he looked younger, softer, still grieving but maybe finally healing. Maybe you are, she said quietly. Moving on. Maybe you just didn't realize it. Their eyes met, held, and Sarah felt that pull again, that dangerous current that seemed to arc between them whenever they got too close. Cole looked away first. Maybe. They finished the dishes in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Emma was the bridge between them. The little girl had latched onto Sarah with a fierceness that was both touching and heartbreaking. She followed Sarah around the house, chattering constantly, demanding stories and hugs and help with her doll's tangled hair. And when Cole was home, Emma insisted on pulling them both together, making them watch her dance, or eat pretend tea from tiny cups, or listen to her sing the songs Sarah had taught her. You're spoiling her, Cole said one afternoon, but there was no heat in the words. They were sitting on the porch while Emma played in the yard collecting wildflowers in the old basket Sarah had found for her. She deserves to be spoiled a little. Sarah watched the little girl dart from flower to flower, her dark curls bouncing. She's had too much loss for someone so young. We all have. Sarah glanced at him. He was leaning against the porch rail and his eyes on his daughter, and there was something in his expression that made her chest ache. Love, yes, but also fear. The fear of someone who'd lost too much and couldn't bear to lose again. Cole, she said softly, you are allowed to be happy again. It's not betraying Rebecca's memory. His jaw tightened. How do you know that it's what I think? Because I can see it. Every time Emma makes you smile, you catch yourself. Every time you laugh, you stop. You're punishing yourself for being alive when she's not. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Sarah stood, moved to stand beside him at the rail. Close enough to touch, though neither of them did. I'm running from ghosts too, Cole. Different ghosts maybe, but just as real. And I know what it's like to think you don't deserve peace. What are you running from, Sarah? The question was gentle, but it carried weight. Sarah looked out at Emma, at the mountains beyond, at the vast sky that seemed to promise freedom and trap her all at once. I witnessed something I shouldn't have, she said finally. A murder. The man who did it, he's powerful, connected. He has people looking for me. If they find me... She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Cole's face had gone hard. How long have you been running? 3 months, since the night it happened. And you came here because Thomas offered safety. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. Sarah turned to face him fully. I'm sorry. I know I should have told you sooner. I know you have every right to send me away. I'm not sending you away. The words were flat, final. But we need to talk about this, tonight after Emma's asleep. He walked down the porch steps and across the yard to where Emma was examining a particularly interesting bug. Sarah watched him crouch down beside his daughter, pointing at something in the grass, and felt her heart twist. She'd complicated his life, brought danger to his doorstep even if that danger hadn't arrived yet. She should leave, pack her things, and disappear before Marcus Delacroix's men tracked her here. But as Emma squealed with delight and Cole's rare smile broke across his face, Sarah knew she wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, after Emma had been put to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Sarah found Cole in the study, a small room off the main hall that she'd only glimpsed before. He was sitting at a desk covered in ledgers and papers, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Close the door, he said. Sarah did, then took the chair across from him. The room smelled of leather and wood smoke and whiskey. It felt intimate, this late-night conversation, and Sarah was acutely aware that she was in her nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Tell me everything, Cole said, from the beginning. So she did. She told him about working for Marcus Delacroix, about staying late that night to finish a correspondence, about hearing voices in the warehouse below, and looking down to see Delacroix put a gun to Vincent Chen's head and pull the trigger. She told him about running about the men who'd come to her boarding house the next day, about how she'd fled with only what she could carry, about how Thomas's letters had arrived at the perfect moment or the worst moment, depending on how you looked at it. Cole listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he took a long drink of whiskey. This Delacroix, he said. How hard will he look for you? Hard enough. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands shook in her lap. Vincent Chen was a rival. His death sent a message. The last thing Delacroix wants is a witness who can place him at the scene. Would you testify if given the chance? Sarah hadn't thought about it in those terms. She'd been too focused on survival. I don't know. Maybe, if it meant stopping him. Cole nodded slowly. All right. You can stay, for as long as you need to. Cole, you don't understand. If his men come here, then we'll deal with it. He set down his glass and leaned forward, his eyes intense. I have ranch hands. Guns. This isn't some city boarding house where you're money and vulnerable. You're under my protection now, Sarah. That means something. The words should have made her feel safe. Instead, they made her feel terrified in a different way. Protection meant connection. Connection meant caring. And caring meant pain when it inevitably ended. Why? The word came out smaller than she intended. Why would you do this for me? I'm nothing to you, just some woman your brother was going to marry. You're not nothing. Cole's voice was rough. You're Emma's. He stopped seemed to search for the right word. You're important to Emma, and that makes you important to me. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly romantic. But the way he looked at her as he said it made Sarah's breath catch. I should go to bed, she said, standing quickly. It's late. Sarah. His voice stopped her at the door. Be careful. In town, I mean. Don't talk to strangers. If anyone asks too many questions, tell me. She nodded and slipped out, her heart pounding. In her room, she undressed and climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept thinking about the way Cole had said her name, the way he'd looked at her across the desk, the way her body had responded to his presence, even as her mind screamed warnings. This was getting complicated. The following Saturday, Cole surprised her by asking if she wanted to go to town. There's a barn dance at the Hendersons' place, he said over breakfast. Most of the territory will be there. He cleared his throat. I thought it might be good for you to meet some of the neighbors, make some friends. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. Staying invisible, staying unnoticed, that was how she'd survived. But Emma was bouncing in her seat, thrilled at the prospect of a party, and Cole was looking at her with something almost like hope in his eyes. All right, she heard herself say. That sounds nice. Mary came to watch Emma for the evening, and Sarah found herself in her room staring at her limited wardrobe with something close to panic. She had one good dress, a deep green silk she'd managed to save from her flight from San Francisco. She put it on, pinned up her hair, and studied herself in the small mirror. She looked like someone from another life. Someone who went to parties and danced and smiled at strangers. Someone who wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. When she came downstairs, Cole was waiting in the hall. He'd changed too. A clean shirt, his hair combed back, his boots polished. He looked up as she descended, and the expression that crossed his face made her steps falter. Want. Pure, undisguised want. Then it was gone, locked behind his usual careful control. But Sarah had seen it, and her body responded with a heat that spread from her chest to her fingertips. You look nice, he said, his voice rough. Thank you. So do you. They drove to the Hendersons in the wagon, the silence between them charged with everything they weren't saying. The barn was already full when they arrived, lanterns strung from the rafters, a fiddle band in the corner, tables laden with food. People turned to look as they entered, and Sarah felt the weight of their curiosity. Is that Cole Harrison? Who's the woman with him? Must be that mail-order bride we heard about, the one who was supposed to marry Thomas. Sarah kept her head high and her hand light on Cole's arm as he introduced her around. The neighbors were friendly if curious. They expressed condolences about Thomas, complimented Sarah's dress, asked how she was settling into ranch life. She smiled and answered and tried to ignore the way Cole's hand occasionally pressed against her back, guiding her through the crowd. When the dancing started, Sarah found herself pulled onto the floor by various ranchers and townsmen. She danced and laughed and almost forgot to be afraid. Almost forgot that she was hiding. Almost forgot everything except the music and the movement and the rare feeling of belonging. Then Cole cut in. May I? He asked the young cowboy who'd been partnering her, but he was already taking Sarah's hand. The music slowed. Cole's hand found her waist large and warm and sure. Sarah's hand rested on his shoulder, and they began to move together. This wasn't like dancing with the others. This was something else entirely. Cole held her closer than was strictly proper, his gray eyes locked on hers. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they'd been dancing together for years instead of minutes. Sarah's breath came shorter. She could feel the heat of his body through her dress, could smell leather and soap and something uniquely him, could see the way his gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, then dragged back up to her eyes. Sarah, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer or a curse. Cole. The music swirled around them, but Sarah barely heard it. She was drowning in the moment, in the feel of his hand on her waist, in the pressure of his fingers wrapped around hers, in the way his body moved against hers, deliberate and claiming. This was dangerous. This was everything she'd told herself to avoid. But she couldn't make herself pull away. The song ended too soon and not soon enough. The other dancers were clapping, but Cole and Sarah stood still, caught in each other's arms. We should, Cole started. Yes, Sarah agreed, though she had no idea what he was going to suggest. He led her outside where the night air was cool and welcome against her flushed skin. Other couples milled about talking and laughing, but Cole guided her away from them toward the dark edge of the yard where the barn cast long shadows. I shouldn't have asked you to dance, he said. Why not? Because now all I can think about is doing it again. He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his face was all sharp angles and shadows. And that's not, we're not. I know what we're not, Sarah said. You don't have to explain it. Then what are we? The question sounded torn from him. Because you're living in my house, raising my daughter, and I can't keep pretending you're just the housekeeper. Sarah's heart was pounding bohar hard. She was sure he could hear it. What do you want me to be? Cole's jaw worked. His hands flexed at his sides as if he wanted to reach for her but didn't quite dare. I don't know, but I know I think about you all the time. I know I wait for you to come downstairs in the morning. I know when Emma laughs at something you've said, I feel. He stopped, shook his head. This is crazy. You were supposed to marry my brother. But I didn't. He's gone and we're here and I. Sarah took a step closer, closing the distance between them. I think about you too. The confession hung in the night air between them. Cole's eyes darkened and Sarah watched his control waver. His hand came up slowly and his fingers traced the line of her jaw. The touch was gentle, reverent, and it set every nerve in Sarah's body alight. Sarah, he breathed, if I kiss you, everything changes. I know. We can't go back. I know. I'm still broken, still grieving. I can't promise. Stop talking, Sarah whispered, and she rose on her toes to close the final distance between them. The kiss was everything and nothing like she'd imagined. Gentle at first, almost tentative, as if Cole were afraid she might shatter. His lips were warm and soft, and he tasted like whiskey and starlight. Sarah's hands found their way to his shoulders, and she felt his sharp intake of breath. Then the gentleness shattered. Cole's arms came around her, pulling her against him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and claiming. His hand cupped the back of her head, angling her mouth to his, and Sarah melted into him. She felt the wall of his chest against her breasts, felt the thunder of his heartbeat matching her own, felt the way his body trembled, with the same need that was flooding through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. God, he said roughly, I've wanted to do that for weeks. Why didn't you? Because I'm an idiot. He pulled back enough to see her face. Because I was trying to honor Thomas's memory. Because I told myself you deserve better than a man who's still half in love with a ghost. Cole? But I can't. His thumb traced her lower lip and Sarah's breath caught. I can't stay away from you anymore. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. Then don't. Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Don't pretend. He kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense. His hands explored her back, her waist, and Sarah felt herself arching into his touch. Heat was building between them, dangerous and sweet, and she wanted laughter drifted from the barn, breaking the spell. Cole pulled back, his breathing ragged. We should go back, before people talk. They're already talking. Let me rephrase before I do something that'll really give them something to talk about. His eyes were dark with promise and restraint in equal measure. Come on. They returned to the dance, but everything had changed. Every time their eyes met across the room, Sarah felt the echo of that kiss. Every time Cole's hand brushed hers as they said their goodbyes, electricity sparked between them. The ride home was silent, but the air in the wagon was thick with tension. Sarah was hyper-aware of Cole beside her, the way his hands held the reins, the way his thigh was mere inches from hers, the way he kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. When they reached the ranch, Cole helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered on her waist and they stood there in the moonlight, neither quite ready to let go. I meant what I said, Cole told her quietly. Everything's different now. I know. But your situation hasn't changed. Delacroix is still out there. You're still in danger. I know that too. So we have to be careful. Smart. His hand came up to cup her face. But I'm not letting you go, Sarah. Not now. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like the first safe thing she'd heard in months. She went to bed that night with the taste of Cole still on her lips and the feel of his hands still burning on her skin. She knew she should be worried about tomorrow, about what came next, about the inevitable complications. But for the first time since she'd fled San Francisco, Sarah let herself hope. The next few weeks were a study in restraint. They didn't kiss again, not with Emma always present, not with the ranch hands coming and going, not with propriety demanding distance. But the awareness between them was constant thrumming just beneath the surface of every interaction. Cole would reach past her for the coffee pot, and their hands would brush. Electric. Sarah would bring him water in the fields, and their fingers would touch as he took the ladle. Charged. At night, they'd sit on the porch after Emma was asleep close enough to touch, but never touching, talking about everything and nothing until the stars wheeled overhead. "Tell me about San Francisco," Cole said one night. Sarah tucked her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "What do you want to know? What you loved about it before things went bad?" She thought about the city she'd fled, the fog rolling in off the bay, the clang of cable cars, the crush of humanity in the streets. The energy, I think. The feeling that anything could happen, that you could be anyone. And now I think I'd rather be someone in a place that's quiet, where the stars are so bright they hurt to look at, where a little girl can play in the yard without fear. She looked at him. Where a man can heal without the world demanding he hurry up about it. Cole's hand found hers in the darkness. "You're good for me, Sarah Bennett. And you're good for me, Cole Harrison." They sat like that, hands linked until the cold drove them inside. But the peace couldn't last. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the stranger rode up to the ranch. Sarah was in the kitchen, Emma playing at her feet when she heard the horse. Something made her look out the window and her blood turned to ice. The man was well dressed out of place on a working ranch, and he was watching the house with the focused intensity of a hunter who'd found his quarry. "Emma," Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice calm, "go upstairs and play in your room, sweetheart. Right now." "But now, Emma, please." The little girl must have heard something in her tone because she went without further argument. Sarah waited until she heard Emma's door close, then moved to the kitchen drawer where she knew Cole kept a pistol. She just wrapped her fingers around the grip when there was a knock at the door. Sarah's hands were steady as she approached. She'd known this day would come, had been waiting for it really ever since she'd stepped off the train in Cedar Ridge. Marcus Delacroix didn't let witnesses walk away. She opened the door with the pistol behind her back. The stranger smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Harrison, who's asking?" "My name is Robert Watts. I'm a private investigator from San Francisco." He pulled out a card, held it where she could see it. "I'm looking for a woman named Sarah Bennett. I believe you might be able to help me." Sarah's mind raced. Deny everything, run shoot him, and deal with the consequences. Then she heard hoofbeats, and Cole appeared around the corner of the barn riding hard. He must have seen the stranger from the pasture. Cole dismounted in one smooth motion and was at the porch in seconds, positioning himself between Sarah and Watts. "Who are you and what do you want?" Watts' smile tightened. "I was just introducing myself to your wife." "She's not my wife." Cole's voice was flat, dangerous. "And you're trespassing. State your business or get off my land." "I'm looking for Sarah Bennett. She's wanted for questioning in connection with a murder in San Francisco." "I'm Sarah Bennett," Sarah said, stepping forward. Cole's arms shot out, keeping her behind him, but she pushed past. "What do you want?" Watts' eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "I need you to come with me back to San Francisco. There are people who want to talk to you about what you saw." "The hell she will." Cole's hand moved to his gun belt. "Mr. Harrison, I don't think you understand." "No, you don't understand." Cole's voice was cold as winter. "Sarah is under my protection. She's not going anywhere with you or anyone else unless she chooses to. And if you're working for Marcus Delacroix, you can tell him that if he wants her, he'll have to go through me and every man on this ranch to get her." Watts' professional mask slipped. "I'm not working for Delacroix. I'm working for District Attorney Morrison. He's building a case against Delacroix for the Chen murder, but he needs Sarah's testimony." The words hung in the air. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You're not here to kill me." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Kill you, Miss Bennett. You're the star witness. Morrison has been looking for you for months. He wants to put Delacroix away, but he needs you to testify about what you saw." Sarah's knees went weak. Cole's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" Cole demanded. "You can telegraph Morrison yourself. He's been authorized by the governor to offer Miss Bennett full protection in exchange for her testimony." Watts pulled out more papers. I have the paperwork here. Sarah's mind was reeling. All this time she'd been running from people who wanted to help her. All this time she'd been hiding when she could have been fighting back. What kind of protection? Cole asked. Federal marshals, safe house, new identity after the trial if she wants it. Watts looked at Sarah. You'd be doing the city a great service, Miss Bennett. Delacroix has gotten away with too much for too long. I need to think, Sarah said. I need time. I understand, but Miss Bennett Delacroix's men are still looking for you. Every day you wait is a day they might find you. Watts tipped his hat. I'm staying at the Cedar Ridge Hotel. You have until Friday to decide. After that, I have to report back to San Francisco. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Sarah and Cole standing on the porch. Sarah, Cole started. Not now. She couldn't look at him, couldn't process what this meant. I need to check on Emma. She fled inside and Cole let her go. That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah finally came downstairs. Cole was in the study staring at the papers Watts had left. He looked up when she entered, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. What are you going to do? He asked. Sarah sank into the chair across from him. I don't know. If I testify, Delacroix goes to prison. He can't hurt anyone else. But it means going back to San Francisco. It means leaving. Cole's voice was flat. Yes. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Cole spoke, and his voice was rough with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. You should do it. What? Testify. Put that bastard away. It's the right thing to do. But I'd have to leave. Leave Emma. Leave. She couldn't say it. Couldn't say leave you. I know. Cole's hands were fisted on the desk. But Sarah, you've been running for 3 months, living in fear. If you testify, that ends. You get your life back. What if I don't want my old life back? What if I want, she gestured helplessly at the house around them. What if I want this? Cole stood abruptly and crossed to her. He pulled her to her feet, his hands gripping her shoulders. You don't know what you want. You've been in survival mode since the moment you arrived. You came here to escape, not to stay. That was before what? Before Emma needed you, he stopped, his jaw working. I can't be the reason you don't testify, Sarah. I can't be the reason you let a murderer walk free. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. You're not. This is my choice. Then make it. His voice gentled, but his grip stayed firm. Make it for the right reasons, not because you're afraid to live. I'm not afraid to leave. I'm afraid of what happens if I do. What if Delacroix gets to me before the trial? What if the DA can't protect me? What if, her voice broke, what if I never see you again? Cole's control shattered. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. God, Sarah, don't you think I'm terrified too? She clung to him, her face buried in his chest, breathing in the scent of him. Tell me what to do. I can't. This has to be your decision. His hand stroked her hair, and his voice was thick with emotion. But whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to testify, I'll make sure you get to San Francisco safely. If you want to stay here and keep hiding, I'll protect you with my life. His arms tightened. Just tell me what you need. Sarah pulled back enough to see his face. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, his jaw tight with the effort of holding himself together. This strong, stoic man was breaking apart for her. I need you, she whispered. I need this. I need to know that if I go to San Francisco and testify and survive it, I have something to come back to. You do. Cole's hand came up to cup her face. You have me. You have Emma. You have a home here for as long as you want it. Promise me. I promise. He lowered his head, and his lips brushed hers in a kiss that tasted like tears and desperation and hope, all tangled together. Come back to us, Sarah. No matter what happens, come back. She kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it, all the fear and love and longing she'd been holding back. Cole responded with equal fervor, his hands moving to her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent, and Sarah felt the last of her restraint crumbling. Cole, she breathed against his mouth. I don't want to leave. Not tonight. Not. He understood what she wasn't saying. His eyes searched hers, dark with want and warring with restraint. Sarah, if we do this, I know. She took his hand and placed it over her racing heart. I know what it means. I'm choosing it anyway. For a long moment, Cole didn't move. Then with a sound that was half groan, half surrender, he lifted her into his arms and carried her upstairs. Cole's room was larger than Sarah's, dominated by a wide bed and furnished simply. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. He set her down gently as if she might break, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. "Last chance to change your mind," Cole said, but his hands were already moving to the pins in her hair, freeing them one by one until the dark mass tumbled around her shoulders. "I'm not changing my mind." Sarah's fingers went to the buttons of his shirt, trembling slightly. "Are you?" "God, no." His hands cupped her face and he kissed her slow and deep and thorough, as if he had all the time in the world to memorize the taste of her. Sarah's world narrowed to the feel of him. The warmth of his skin beneath her hands as she pushed his shirt off his shoulders. The way his breath hitched when her fingers traced the muscles of his chest. The reverent way he touched her as if she were something precious he was afraid to damage. "You're shaking," she whispered. "It's been a long time." His voice was rough. "And you're Sarah, you're—" She kissed him before he could finish, pouring all her reassurance into the contact. This wasn't about comparisons or ghosts. This was about them here now. Cole's hands found the laces of her dress, and he loosened them with surprising gentleness. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet, and Sarah stood before him in her chemise and corset, her heart pounding. "Beautiful," Cole breathed. His fingers traced the line of her collarbone down to where her pulse fluttered at the base of her throat. "So damn beautiful." He unlaced her corset slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and when the last barrier fell away, Sarah saw the naked want in his face. But there was more than want. There was tenderness, affection, maybe even the beginning of something deeper. "Cole," she whispered, and he lifted her again, laying her on the bed with infinite care. The firelight flickered across his skin as he removed the last of his clothes and joined her. Sarah's breath caught at the sight of him, all hard muscle and lean strength, scars here and there, telling stories of a hard life lived. He was beautiful in a way that made her throat tight. "Tell me if I hurt you," he said, settling beside her, his hand skimming from her shoulder to her hip. "Tell me if you want me to stop." "Don't stop." Sarah pulled him down to her, and when their bodies met skin to skin for the first time, they both gasped at the contact. What followed was slow and sweet and almost unbearably tender. Cole explored every inch of her with his hands and mouth, learning what made her sigh, what made her arch into his touch, what made her cry out his name. Sarah discovered the places on his body that made him groan, the curve where his neck met his shoulder, the sensitive spot just below his ribs, the way he shuddered when she ran her nails down his back. When he finally moved over her, his eyes locked on hers, dark with desire and something softer. "Horta." "Yes." She wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer. "Yes, Cole. Please." He entered her slowly, giving her time to adjust, and Sarah felt herself stretch around him. There was a moment of discomfort, then fullness, then a pleasure so intense it stole her breath. Cole held still, his forehead pressed to hers, his whole body trembling with the effort of restraint. "Okay," he managed. "More than okay." Sarah moved experimentally, and they both groaned. "Cole, please move." He did, setting a rhythm that built slowly, steadily, until Sarah was gasping and clinging to him. The world narrowed to the slide of skin on skin, the ragged sound of their breathing, the way Cole's hands gripped her hips as if she were the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. "Sarah," he groaned against her throat. "God, Sarah." She felt the tension coiling tighter in her belly, felt herself climbing towards something bright and devastating. And when Cole's hand slipped between them, finding the place that made her see stars, she shattered. Her release crashed over her in waves, and she heard herself cry out Cole's name. He followed a moment later, his body going rigid as he found his own completion, and the sound he made, raw and vulnerable and utterly undone, would stay with her forever. They collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts racing in tandem. Cole rolled to his side, pulling Sarah with him, keeping them joined. His hand stroked her hair, and his lips found her temple, her cheek, her mouth in kisses that were soft and sweet. "Stay," he whispered. "Stay with me tonight." Sarah curled into him, her head on his chest where she could hear his heartbeat slowing. "I'm not going anywhere." They lay like that as the fire burned down to embers, neither speaking, neither willing to break the spell. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. Inside, two broken people had found for one night at least of a kind of wholeness. Eventually, Sarah felt Cole's breathing even out into sleep. She should go back to her own room before Emma woke. She should be practical. But she stayed breathing in his scent, feeling the rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek, and let herself pretend that this could last. Morning came too soon. Sarah woke to find herself alone in Cole's bed, the sheets beside her still warm. She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest, and found him standing by the window, already dressed, watching the sunrise. "I didn't want to wake you," he said without turning, "but Emma will be up soon." Reality crashed back in. Sarah found her chemise and began dressing quickly, her fingers fumbling with the laces. Cole turned and crossed to her, gently pushing her hands aside to help. "Last night," he started. "I know." Sarah kept her eyes on his hands, not trusting herself to look at his face. "It doesn't change what I have to do." "No." His fingers stilled on the last lace. "But it changes what you're coming back to, if you decide to come back." "When?" She looked up at him, then willing him to understand. "When I come back, Cole. Not if." Something fierce flashed in his eyes. He kissed her hard and possessive, then stepped back. "Then you better come back, Sarah Bennett, because I'll be waiting." She slipped out of his room and back to her own, her body still humming with the memory of his touch. She had just finished dressing when she heard Emma's door open. "Sarah." The little girl appeared in her doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "I'm hungry." And just like that, the day began. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Sarah made her decision and sent word to Watts that she would testify. Cole sent a telegram to District Attorney Morrison demanding guarantees for Sarah's safety. The reply came back within hours: full federal protection transport to and from San Francisco, and a promise that she could return to Montana immediately after the trial. But there were complications. The trial wouldn't start for at least 6 weeks. Sarah would have to leave now, go into protective custody, and wait. 6 weeks minimum, possibly longer. 6 weeks away from Emma, away from Cole, away from the life she'd just started building. "I don't want to go," she told Cole the night before her departure. They were in the study again, the door closed, Emma asleep upstairs. "I know it's the right thing, but..." "Then don't." Cole pulled her into his arms. "Stay here. Marry me." Sarah's breath caught. "What? Marry me?" His eyes were fierce, determined. "Right now, today, before you leave. Then you're not Sarah Bennett anymore. You're Sarah Harrison. Delacroix's men are looking for Sarah Bennett. They won't find Sarah Harrison." "Cole, that's not... You can't propose just to give me a cover story." "I'm not." His hands framed her face. "I'm proposing because I love you. Because I've loved you since you sang Emma to sleep the first night you were here. Because you brought light back into this house when I'd forgotten what light looked like. Because the thought of you being in San Francisco without me makes me want to put my fist through a wall." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "You love me. So damn much it scares me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. "I know it's fast. I know we've barely had any time. But Sarah, I've wasted enough time grieving. I don't want to waste any more of it being afraid to live. So marry me, please. Make it official that you're coming back here to Emma and me when this is over." Sarah's heart was so full she thought it might burst. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I love you too. Yes to all of it." Cole's kiss was desperate and tender all at once, and Sarah kissed him back with everything she had. They made love again that night, slower and more intense than before, storing up memories for the separation to come. No. They were married this next morning by the traveling preacher who happened to be in Cedar Ridge. Mary stood as witness, and Emma wore her best dress and carried wildflowers. The ceremony was simple: no white dress, no guests, no fanfare. But when Cole slipped a plain gold band on Sarah's finger and promised to love her until death, Sarah believed him. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, and Cole did long and deep enough to make Mary clear her throat and Emma giggle. "Mrs. Harrison," Cole said against her lips, and Sarah felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. But there was no time for a honeymoon. Watts was waiting with a federal marshal in the train east, left in 2 hours. Emma cried when Sarah hugged her goodbye. "Don't go," the little girl sobbed. "Please don't go." I'll come back, sweetheart. I promise. Sarah's own tears were falling freely now. I'll come back as soon as I can, and then I'll never leave you again. Cole carried Emma as he walked Sarah to the wagon. His face was carefully neutral, but Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. 6 weeks, and he said, 6 weeks or less. I'll write every day. So will I. He set Emma down and pulled Sarah close one last time. Come back to us. I will, I promise. The kiss they shared was witnessed by half of Cedar Ridge, but neither of them cared. When Sarah finally pulled away and climbed into the wagon beside Watts, she looked back to see Cole holding Emma, both of them waving. She waved back until they disappeared from sight. Damn. San Francisco was everything Sarah remembered, and nothing like she expected. The federal marshals installed her in a safe house, a small apartment above a bakery in a quiet neighborhood. She was allowed no visitors and could only leave under escort. The days were long and lonely. She wrote to Cole and Emma every evening, pouring her heart onto paper. Cole's letters came back just as frequently, telling her about the ranch, about Emma's latest antics, about how much he missed her. District Attorney Morrison visited regularly, preparing her testimony. He was a bulldog of a man determined to bring Delacroix down. The case was strong. They had physical evidence linking Delacroix to the murder weapon, financial records, showing motive, and now with Sarah's eyewitness account, they had everything they needed for a conviction. You're doing a brave thing, Morrison told her. Testifying against a man like Delacroix takes courage. I'm not brave, Sarah said. I just want to go home. And then let's make sure you can. The trial began in early November and the courthouse was packed. Sarah sat in the witness waiting room, her hands clasped tightly, and tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in that courtroom, Marcus Delacroix was watching. When they called her to testify, she walked in with her head high. She didn't look at Delacroix. She looked at Morrison, at the judge, at the jury of 12 men who would decide if her testimony was enough. And she told them everything. She described working in Delacroix's office, described staying late that night, described seeing Vincent Chen forced to his knees, seeing the gun, hearing the shot. She described running, hiding, fearing for her life. Delacroix's lawyer tried to discredit her, called her a spurned employee, a woman with a grudge, a liar seeking attention. But Sarah stood firm. She answered every question calmly, clearly, and when it was over, she could see in the jury's faces that they believed her. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Sarah testified twice more, each time adding details that built the prosecution's case. And finally, on a gray November morning, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty. Marcus Delacroix was sentenced to hang for the murder of Vincent Chen. Sarah sat in the courtroom and felt a weight lift that she'd been carrying for months. It was over. She was free. Morrison found her afterward. You did good, Mrs. Harrison. Real good. When can I go home? The train leaves tomorrow morning. I've got marshals to escort you to Montana. He shook her hand. Thank you for your courage. The city owes you a debt. Sarah didn't want the city's debt. She wanted her husband and her daughter and the life she'd left behind. That night, she packed her few belongings and wrote one last letter to Cole. Coming home. I love you. Wait for me. The journey back to Montana felt endless. Sarah counted every mile, every hour, every minute. When the train finally pulled into Cedar Ridge, 2 days later, she was out of her seat before it had fully stopped. Cole was waiting on the platform. Sarah saw him and broke into a run. He met her halfway, catching her in his arms and lifting her off her feet. They kissed like people who'd been drowning and had finally found air, desperate and grateful and full of promises. You came back, Cole said against her hair. I told you I would. Mama, Emma's voice rang out, and Sarah looked down to see the little girl running toward them. Sarah dropped to her knees and scooped Emma into her arms, holding her tight. I'm home, baby. I'm home for good. Cole helped them both to their feet, and the three of them stood on that platform, wrapped in each other's arms, a family finally whole. The ranch welcomed Sarah back like it had been waiting for her. Everything was the same, the mountains in the distance, the wide sky overhead, the house with its creaking floors and worn furniture. But everything was different too, because this time Sarah wasn't running. This time she was home. That first night back after Emma had been put to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Os led Sarah to their room, not his room anymore, but theirs. He undressed her slowly, reverently, and made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. I was terrified you wouldn't come back, he confessed afterward, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. That you'd realize you could have any life you wanted, and why would you choose this one? Sarah propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. Because this is the life where I get to wake up next to you every morning, where I get to watch Emma grow up, where I get to build something real. She kissed him softly. I didn't choose Montana Cole, I chose you, and I choose you every time. His arms tightened around her. I love you, Mrs. Harrison. I love you too. They lay together in the darkness, and Sarah felt peace settle over her like a blanket. The ghosts of San Francisco were finally laid to rest. The fear that had driven her here was gone. All that remained was this: a man she loved, a daughter she'd claimed as her own, and a future that stretched out before them like the Montana sky, vast and bright and full of promise. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow. Sarah discovered she loved the cold, the way the air was so crisp it hurt to breathe, the way the mountains looked draped in white, the way the house felt warm and safe against the elements outside. She also discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole on Christmas morning, with Emma sitting between them by the tree opening presents. She handed him a small wrapped package, and when he opened it to find a tiny pair of knitted booties, his face went blank with shock. Sarah. Due in July, she said, unable to keep the smile off her face. Cole's eyes filled with tears. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her temple, her cheek, her mouth. A baby, he whispered. We're having a bum. Emma, not to be left out, climbed into their laps. I get to be a big sister. You do, sweetheart. Sarah hugged them both. You're going to be the best big sister in all of Montana. And they spent Christmas Day as a family, eating Mary's feast, playing in the snow, with Emma sitting by the fire as evening fell. And when night came and Emma was asleep, Cole and Sarah lay in bed together, his hand on her still flat stomach. I thought I'd lost everything when Rebecca died, he said quietly. I thought I'd never feel whole again. But Sarah, you didn't just bring me back to life. You gave me a reason to want to live again. You did the same for me. Sarah covered his hand with hers. I was running from death when I came here. But you and Emma, you taught me how to live. No more running. No more running. She turned in his arms to face him. This is where I belong, with you, always. Cole kissed her slow and deep and made love to her with the tenderness of a man who'd found something precious he thought was lost forever. And as Sarah arched into his touch, crying out his name in the darkness, she knew that whatever happened next, whatever challenges came, whatever storms they weathered, they would face it together. She was Sarah Harrison now, wife, mother, rancher's woman, home, and she had never been more grateful to be found. 6 months later, on a warm July evening, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas after the brother who'd brought them together. Emma declared him the most beautiful baby in the world and refused to leave his side. Cole held his son with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, and Sarah saw in his expression everything they'd built together, healing hope and a love that had transformed them both. Thank you, he whispered, for coming into our lives, for staying, for giving me this. Thank you for waiting for me, Sarah replied, for believing I'd come back. Always, Cole said and kissed her. I'll always wait for you. I'll always believe in us. And as Sarah looked around at her family, at Emma carefully holding her baby brother's hand, at Cole gazing at them all with such love, it hurt to see. She knew that every mile she'd traveled, every fear she'd faced, every risk she'd taken had led her here, to Montana, to Cole, to home. The journey had been long and terrifying and painful, but God, it had been worth it, every step of the way. Thank you for joining us on Sarah and Cole's journey from broken promises to redemption and love. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more Western romances that celebrate second chances, healing, and the power of family. We believe in stories that remind us it's never too late to start over, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the family we choose is the one that saves us. What did you think of Sarah and Cole's story? Drop a comment below and let us know your favorite moment. Should we continue with more Montana Territory tales? Your feedback helps us create the stories you want to hear. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. Until then, may you find your own piece of Montana sky, and may you have the courage to fight for the love you deserve. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.